Thank you for joining me on this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm your host, Master Moose. The state of Maryland has never really known what to do with its population of incarcerated women. Women have always been an afterthought as far as the prison system is concerned, and it has led to a perpetual state of neglect and disinvestment in the kind of facilities and programs that incarcerated men get but women don't. The Maryland Correctional Institute for Women, commonly called the CUT, is one of the oldest prisons in Maryland. In the 19th century, women were first housed in the quarters reserved for them at the Maryland Penitentiary. They were later lodged in a section of the Maryland House of Correction, the CUT, which opened in 1879. Not until 1941 did the state construct a separate prison for women. The Women's CUT in Jessup was established in 1941 as the Women's Prison of the State of Maryland. It was renamed in 1945 as the Maryland State Reformatory for Women. In 1962, it became the Maryland Institute for Women. Its present name was adopted in 1964. It housed prisoners from various custody levels, from minimum, medium security to death row. After a 2-year struggle to secure funding, 82 years later, the legislation passed a capital budget measurement to funnel $2 million towards the planning and construction of a women's pre-release system. Joining me today to talk about the impact of this is Monica Cooper. Welcome, Monica. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yes, sir. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to be here and to speak on this topic here at Rattling the Bars. My name's Monica Cooper. I'm the executive director of the Maryland Justice Project. We've been around since 2013, and our main goal was to try to push legislation that would help women and girls that are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated to have a better life, to be able to have access to jobs, education, homes, and things like that, and housing. We've since pushed the boundaries some, realizing that one of the main things that a person needs, particularly women, because they tend to be the breadwinners in the household, they tend to be the ones that's responsible for the children. So one of the things that we're pushing the boundaries in terms of moving women and girls into solar energy, moving women and girls into the tech fields, into robotics, into those jobs that's, one, going to be around for years to come, and two, that's going to pay a good salary. It's hard for a woman that's got 3 children to work at McDonald's and still expect to be able to provide a decent life for her children. So we're kind of pushing the bars a little bit and trying to be a part of the climate change initiatives, the greening of our spaces.
Okay, so basically y'all are involved in all aspects of...
We are.
And ensuring that women develop the necessary skills so they can have a quality life. Speaking of quality life, so we have a situation in the state of Maryland where we know for a fact that it's only one prison in the state of Maryland that houses women. It's called the Maryland Correctional Institute, commonly called the CUT. And we recognize that when it comes to women and in any system, prison system, anywhere in the United States, it's a disconnect between them and the treatment that they're getting, or the lack of treatment that they're getting, and that of men. Recently, and this has been a progression, so I'm gonna outline, then you can walk us back through the progression. Y'all had got the Maryland General Assembly legislature to pass a bill that highlighted the necessity for women to have a pre-release system, because Maryland don't have no pre-release system for women. And in that, getting that done, y'all was able to get the state legislator to mandate that the governor allocate money towards this institution or towards this project. I think initially y'all asked for $125,000. All right, y'all have since then went back and got $2 million towards the building of this project. Walk our audience through what exactly is going on, because $2 million is not going to build nothing in terms of providing a lesser security environment for women and allowing the women to have the opportunity to be able to, one, go out on work release, two, get an income, three, be able to have family leave. So unless they have these things, unless they have this institution, the chances of them being able to have that in any form of shape or form will never exist. Walk us through what exactly is going on with this pre-release system and the history of it.
Okay, just a brief history. In 2016, the Maryland Justice Project went to Annapolis, not knowing who would sponsor such a bill. We sought out several candidates. We went to then Senator Barbara Robinson. We were having meetings with her, asking her if she would sponsor this bill to help us to get a pre-release center back open. Senator Robinson didn't come back during the next legislative cycle when we finally got the support that we needed. So we asked then Delegate Mary Washington if she would sponsor the bill. It failed. We brought it back again. This time, I believe it was Senator Washington. Well, she was now Senator Mary Washington, and we thought that the fiery candidate from Montgomery County, Charlotte Crutchfield, would be a great person to push this bill. When it comes to legislation, you really have to choose those people who you know are going to work hard for the bill.
Right.
That's going to rally people around this bill, their constituents, while the advocates do the on-the-ground work. That's what the partnership is about. Because you have some legislators that they really don't work at all. Unless it's something that really, really suits them. They'll have 100 bills. None of them pass. None of them were successful because they don't really do the work that's required.
Right.
But in the interest of time, the bill was passed in 2020. Then Governor Larry Hogan vetoed the bill.
Right.
We were able to come back the following legislative session in 2021 and get the override that we needed to make that thing law.
Okay.
So it became law in 2021.
Okay.
But what happened was, I had mentioned earlier, one of my colleagues called it a economic veto.
Right.
An economic veto is when the person in power doesn't have the will to make this law become the law of the land. So what they'll do is they will fail to put that money in the budget.
Right.
And that means you can't do anything. It's almost as if the veto was effective. So there's an economic veto that stymies your efforts.
Right.
But what that previous governor didn't know is that we are tenacious. We have had to set up meetings in the subcommittees, capital budget, public safety subcommittees, appropriations, wherever the money is. That's where we had to go, which really caused me to learn something.
Okay.
That when you really want to get something done, start where the money at.
That's right.
Because all of it is going to end up in those spaces where those people who are in control of the budget will have to vote on what we're actually going to spend this money on. So we all learned a great deal, and we were all, just excited to be in those spaces because those spaces are generally reserved for big-time lobbyists. Those spaces are generally reserved for companies with a whole bunch of money that get to have those backdoor meetings and get to have the time of those people who sit on the finance committee.
Right.
They're willing to give those people their time, but lowly advocates, very rarely do they don't see us, and they're not even willing to give us their time in many cases. We play good in the sandbox. We let them know that we want to be partners to you. So we had made some inroads where they don't even hear from us. We could call and say, hey, can I meet with Senator so-and-so, or can we set up a meeting with delegates so-and-so? Well, they're busy. But if I call to say I'm from the Xerox company, if I call to say I'm from White and Turner, if I call to say I'm from Potts and Callahan, Zabuto,
Right.
the big time developers,
Right.
they would set up meetings quick, fast, and in a hurry. So I was thrilled that they actually worked with us, and with some nudging,
Right.
we was able to get them, because the legislation says that $2 million would have been allocated to do sort of like a research or a study, like what's needed
Right.
to go in this space. And I think it was another 150,000. Well, of course, we know and they know that that's nowhere near the amount of money that, we need to have this facility built. But, in our mind, as long as it's a line item and it's in the budget, the next logical step is to just add more money
Right.
to that budget line item, because all the hard work had been done. But much to our surprise, we still was being stymied.
How so?
By folks who just didn't have the will to do so.
Okay.
The administrations have changed.
Right.
So at this point, there's really no reason why this project in this past session wasn't fully funded. It should have been. We still have work to do, and we're hoping that just fully fund the project.
Right.
It's needed. It's a Title IX issue. There's no lawyers are involved at this point.
Right. And
But you should not
and
have
Title
to.
IX for our audience is?
And Title IX is an issue that pretty much says that if you do it for the boys, you have to do it for the girls.
That's what we need to educate our audience.
If I can break that down for you, it's against the law.
Right. To discriminate against women.
To discriminate against women. That's in sports.
Right.
That's in every facet of our society. It all hinges on that Title IX issue.
And we know that the reason why it's a Title IX and why we can invoke Title IX is because the men have pre-release, the men have family leave, the men have the ability to go out in the street and work, whereas the women, under the same Department of Corrections, under the same Public Safety and Correctional Service, under the same regulations and rules, don't have these things. Okay, but tell me this here. Why do you think it wasn't fully funded in its past legislative session?
Well, I guess we would give the new historical appointed Curlin Scruggs made history being the first African American Secretary of Corrections. Hats off to the Moore administration, and hats off to our new secretary. Ms. Curlin Scruggs have been in the business for about 27 or 28 years.
That's right.
In fact, I believe that her previous role was that of the reentry
That's right.
person handling those things,
Right.
She was a leftover. Well, she was, I'll say, she was previously in the Hogan administration.
Under Green.
And under Rob Green. And I don't know what her personal decision might be or her personal feeling is about it, but I know that she didn't budge, Green didn't budge, and previous government, Hogan, didn't budge when it came to this effort. And unfortunately, it kind of feels that way still. It was said, well, that was an oversight, that they didn't put it in there, because if the budget comes out every year, right, the annual budget, then if the Department of Social Services, Department of Transportation, Department of Corrections, if they don't make the requests, then it's not going to be put in there. So it is my belief that the Department of Corrections didn't even make the requests.
Right.
The Department of General Services as well play a role, because they are the ones who are going to see this project through. And, we just believe that, neither of them was just haven't been in a hurry to make this happen, even though it's the law. They are breaking the law by not making it happen.
Because, like I told you, I did 48 years in the Maryland prison system. And I knew, and the same system that I was up under, I was under the Department of Public Safety and Correction Service, the Division of Correction, is the same system that the women are housed up under. The same regulations exist. In order for men to get a reduction in security, they have what they call a point system. You accrue so many points, automatically your security is reduced. When your security is reduced, you either move to another institution or release. So when your security is reduced from medium security to minimum security, from minimum security to pre-release, how can the women, and all this is predicated on a number of factors, but more importantly, the number one factor is the amount of time served. Automatically open you up the door for whatever my sentence is, how much time I served on it. If I'm when I become parole eligible, that means I serve at least a 1/4. And under new law, maybe half. But that automatically says that I'm entitled to a security reduction. How is this being done or exercised now with the women's cut being the only women's prison and these different levels of security is in these institutions? How are these women able to progress or even have access to progress?
Well, unfortunately, what the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women have done under the Department of Corrections is they had called themselves shutting down the one pre-release center that they had in the whole state for women. They shut it down and sent them all back to Jessup in 2009. And when we were calling them on it, they decided that they would set up the pre-release inside the prison. That's impossible.
Yes, sir.
It's impossible because it violates COMAR.
Mm-hmm.
There is regs, as they call them. There's regulations that says that once a person reach minimum pre-release and work release status, they are supposed to be housed in a specific manner.
That's right.
One, you're not supposed to be housed behind wires.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then a door, then another door, and another door. So just the fact of the way that they are housed is against the law.
Right.
But they call themselves having the pre-release center inside a facility that houses maximum, medium, minimum, and they kind of dug a hole for themselves.
That's right.
Because now that you have stymied the efforts to have a standalone facility, now you are forced to lie. Now you are forced to intentionally stagnate the progression of the women.
That's right.
It's women that are medium security that probably should be minimum or pre-release. But because they don't have a facility to send them to and they don't want them numbers to rise,
that's right,
they stagnate them. So if you ask them, well, how many eligible folks do you have? They might say, we got 60. Right. When in actuality, if you had classified them, according to what COMAR says, you would probably have about 200.
Okay.
So what the Department of Corrections is, they continue to dig a hole for themselves. You know how when you tell one lie, then you got to tell another one, then you got to remember that lie, then you in this pickle, you in that pickle. That's almost the situation that they are currently in now, honestly.
Okay, and as we close out, I just want you to highlight where y'all going next, because as you just outlined, you know, women are being stagnated by virtue of this intransigent attitude towards just putting the money in there and shovel, dirt, dig, build. Where do y'all go now? Y'all got $2 million, and y'all strategy seem to be working in terms of like holding their feet to the fire. Where do y'all go now, and when do you envision this entity or y'all work coming into fruition in the form of pre-release being and coming to existence?
Well, what we have to do is, our legislative sessions here in Maryland, usually from like January 9th or 11th up until April maybe 15th. We have a 90-day session here. In those entire 90 days, we are constantly setting up meetings, trying to come in spaces like this to talk about our work and trying to gain some support from the community at large.
Right.
So one of our next steps is going to be to go back yet again, even more firmly, and asked that we be fully funded, but this time we're going back with even more supporters.
Right.
And we're going back with a little more statistics and a little more facts because the lack of a facility to help address people's drug addictions, because when you're in these spaces, it's not only just for work release. It's not only just to be able to go home. This facility is the more concentrated efforts on preparing you to go home.
That's right.
That's why it's called the pre-release. This is pre-exiting.
That's right.
So during your pre-exiting, you have to be strong enough to fight your urges to use drugs. You have to have a foundation of training so that you can get a job and maintain a job.
Right.
We should never send anybody home from incarceration unemployed.
That's right.
Everybody that exit a facility should have a job before they come home.
That's right.
So they already coming into community being functional. They already coming in a community helping to build that tax base that we need for our schools, for our roads, those things that we need.
That's right.
So they doing a disservice by having a record number of overdoses at MCIW.
Y'all already know. That's right.
They doing themselves a disservice by sending a woman home that hasn't had a chance for no training. She hasn't had a chance to get a job. You sending her home in the same situation that she came in a prison with. And it's a disservice because if you had that facility, you would be able to concentrate on those things and produce and send home people who are less likely to reoffend. So it's we're coming back with more facts and more statistics and just stronger advocacy. We have been staying away from using the court system, and trying to work with the administration and everything. But it's a sin and a shame that you would have to take somebody to court for something like this. This is obvious. There's nowhere in the world that a logical thinking person wouldn't say, well, we have all of these facilities for women, for men, but we don't have any for women. That's small. There's no way. You don't have to have somebody prove to you why you need it. In fact, the Women's Pre-Release Center came online in the 70s.
That's right.
They were called community rehabilitative centers.
Right.
CARCs. They were
right.
So because you took it away, just put it back.
That's all. That's simple as that.
just put it back. So we coming out strong, and we need a lot of support.
All right, talk about that. Support. Talk about how our audience can get in touch with you. What you want our audience to do.
Info at MarylandJusticeProject.org. And Maryland is written completely out. Info at MarylandJusticeProject.org. We're going to need everybody, and I promise you that we can do this, but we got to do it collectively, and we got to push back. And it doesn't matter what party you belong to. This is not about a particular party. It's not about humanity. It's about humanity. It's not about a particular individual. It's about people seeing that this is what we need and get it done. If you can spend $50 billion to study oysters, bluefish, and things like that, these things that I love the Maryland blue crab. But if you take a look at the budget and see how some of that money is being spent on some of them studies, even on a federal level, you look at the budget, you say, daggone, man, they studying how plants open and close. They done gave the National Institute of Health $40 million to study if the sun going to wink at you.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the stuff that, if you look at it, some of the stuff that they actually put monies towards, it's just like, come on. This is a simple kind of fix.
That's right. Okay. So there you have it. The real news, Rattling the Bars. Monica Cooper, as she outlined, this is a matter of humanity. This is not a matter of earmarking money for something that is not going to have a return on. This is a matter of giving women the same equal rights that you give everybody else. Monica, thank you for joining us today.
pleasure.
We appreciate
Look
you.
forward to coming back.
And we look forward to you coming back. We know that you have a hard schedule today, but we look forward to you coming back, and more importantly, coming back and telling us that the money has been allocated and women will be given equal opportunity to return to society as they should be. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we ask you to continue to support Rattling the Bars and the Real News. It's only on Rattling the Bars and the Real News that you get this kind of information about what's going on with women in Maryland prison system. But more importantly, how we can change this narrative, how we can get our families, our friends, our loved ones to support the efforts that's being done to get a woman's pre-release center built that would provide the opportunity for women to come out with jobs, come out with education, come out with the skills that they'll be able to use to stay in society, and more importantly, to repair their lives and bring up their children. Thank you. We are sending our condolences to the family members of Mutulu Shakur, an activist and member of the Black Liberation Army. He transitioned July the 7th. He was 72 years old. A political prisoner of war, Mutulu was incarcerated for 36 years before being granted parole in December of 2022 due to his declining health. He was denied parole 9 times and diagnosed with terminal bone marrow cancer, with doctors giving him 6 months to live. Rest in power, Dr. Mutulu Shakur.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work, so please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.